Hello, everybody. Welcome back to Simply Thinking Podcast. And this podcast is brought to you in part by Enoch's Heating and Air. Now, the hot days have started here in the valley. Summer is so close. And maybe you need your air conditioner taken care of. You need some maintenance done on it. Well, you are in luck because there is Enoch's Heating and Air. And they are the best company in the Central Valley. Matter of fact, they're the ones who came and installed the AC here in my house. And trust me, if it wasn't for them, we would have had a very horrible summer because it was so hot. And actually, we've been turning it on this year already. And we have been having just some great couple of days and nights. And, their customer service is great. Whenever we've had any issue, they've come down, they've taken care of it right then and there. Their customer service is phenomenal. So maybe you need your air taken care of. Feel free and hit me up. I will definitely give you all the information so that you can contact them. And also, this podcast is brought to you by Confidence Barbershop. All right, guys, here we are. Episode number 14 and part 2 of a series that I started last week. And if you haven't seen the latest episode or even heard it, you can feel free and look for me on YouTube, Simply Thinking Podcast. And also, you can hear me on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Pandora, and Google Play Music. And you can follow me on Instagram, Simply Thinking Podcast. Now, one thing that I started actually last week is if you have any questions, maybe something you heard me say, and you're just like, I want to know more, or you know what, I don't agree with you. Do it. Feel free and email me, or you can shoot me a message on Instagram, but you can email me at simplythinkingpodcasting@gmail.com. So really want to create a dialogue with some of you guys. I really look forward to that. So feel free and shoot me a message or shoot me an email, or even comment on this video here on YouTube. I definitely would do my best to respond to anybody and everybody. All right, guys, here we are, part 2, and I'm excited to start. I know I said this in the previous episode that honestly, this is the reason why I started the podcast, because I wanted to just share these ideas, share my stories of growth, not just spiritual growth, but also just growth as a man, the things I've learned in my 35 years that I've been on this earth, and, just wanted to just share that. Now, I can't wait till COVID ends for a lot of reasons, but one of them is because I want to be able to sit down here in the studio and have guests on. And if you haven't listened to the previous episodes, I've actually interviewed some very phenomenal people. And I want to take the moment really quick because my first guest on the podcast, my friend Matty Geary, who's a very phenomenal, talented, anointed singer and worship leader, he posted this the other day on his Instagram. You can follow him, Rev_Aguirre. He shared that he was actually going to be having 2 singles come out, and I cannot wait for that. Please go and support him. Go and check him out. Trust me, you won't regret it. I mean, he has a phenomenal band with him. I mean, his singers are just great, and like I said, he's a very talented and anointed individual, and it's an honor to know him. So please go and check him out. Do yourself a favor. So yeah, in the meanwhile, while I can't have guests on here, you guys get to enjoy this wonderful voice that I have and be able to hear some of the ideas that I got. So I hope we have a very great couple of episodes where I will continue on this series based off of this book right here, The Allegory of the Cave by my favorite philosopher, Plato. And obviously using the Bible and my own personal experiences and some of the experiences that I've seen in others, but hopefully bring it all together and get us to think a little bit and to examine our life, our faith, and just life in general. So okay, today I'm going to be talking about someone who is absolutely everything to me. And I'm going to say this phrase that was coined by our brothers over there from the Reformed movement, the Reformed theology, Solus Christus, which it's in Latin, which means Christ alone. When I first heard that quote, or just that saying, I was just taken back by it. I'm like, man, that's amazing. I mean, first of all, because it's Latin, and Latin sounds really cool, but just examining it biblically, like, man, Christ is just absolutely everything. I mean, he is everything. There's, nothing exists without him, and he is the center of my life. And one thing I'm going to talk about in this episode is just the Christ that was introduced to me as a kid, because I've been in church my whole life and I've had the privilege of doing that. But the Christ that I was introduced to as a kid it's a Christ that's completely different. It's not the same Christ. It's not the biblical Christ that now by grace I've come to know. And I just want to take you guys back and show you more or less where I am now. And also there will actually be a part 2 to this, so I will continue, but today will be just a simple introduction of my journey, of where it all began, and more or less where I am now through personal experience. So let me start off by reading you guys a quote by one of the greatest thinkers of our time, Mr. C.S. Lewis. He said the following: "I believe in Christianity as I believe that the sun has risen, not only because I see it, but because by it I see everything else." So true. Through Christ we get to see everything, and everything makes sense when we understand who the biblical Christ is. Now, I'm going to do something very special. I'm going to read a couple pages from the Allegory of the Cave, and then I'm going to tie it in with scripture, and just see where we go from there. So, here in this book, let me give you guys just a quick little explanation of what's happening here. So there's these prisoners who are locked up in a cave, and they're chained and they can't see nothing, only what's in front of them. And there's these men who are portraying certain images through a fire, and these men think that that is real, until one day one of the prisoners escapes. And this is where we find ourselves, and he finally steps out for the first time, and he starts to experience the outside world and what is really real. So here we go. Speaking of the prisoner, he will require to grow accustomed to the sight of the upper world. At first, he will see the shadows best, next the reflections of men and of other objects in the water, and then the objects themselves. Then he will gaze upon the light of the moon and the stars and the spangled heaven. And he will see the sky and the stars by night better than the sun or the light of the sun by day. Certainly. Last of all, he will be able to see the sun, and not mere reflections of him in the water, but he will see him in his own proper place and not in another, and he will contemplate him as he is. Certainly. He will then proceed to argue that this is he who gives the season and the years, and is the guardian of all that is in the visible world, and in a certain way the cause of all things which he and his fellows have been accustomed to behold. Now, let me take you guys over to Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 and 18. You know, I kind of feel like I'm preaching. Maybe I should have wore a suit and tie, and right? Or I'm wearing a hat. Don't judge me for those who are watching, okay? Don't judge me. I just had to say that. So, Colossians 1, 15 and 18 says the following way. Speaking of Christ, "The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He is before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body, the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy." So everything that exists is because of Christ. Nothing exists without him. He gives meaning to everything. And going back to what the prisoner experienced, he had a hard time getting accustomed to what he was seeing, because it was the first time that he ever laid eyes on water, laid eyes on the sun, and it took a hard time for him to get accustomed to that. That tends to happen to people who leave a certain way of understanding things. Especially in my journey, when I first came to the understanding of the biblical Christ, it was a little hard to get used to. I had a lot of wrestling going on, but then with time, I started to see that this Christ that was introduced to me as a kid, that's not who he is. That the biblical Christ is someone completely different, and it's so freeing when you're finally come to that understanding of who this biblical Christ is. It's absolutely amazing. You, like the way C.S. Lewis said, that by it you see everything else. But when you are caught up serving a religious Christ or this manufactured, man-made Christ, all you see is this little small box. It's even like you feel boxed in, and even this Christ is boxed in. He only works under certain regulations and certain rules, and Christ can't do anything outside of that. He has to function in a certain way. So it's a Christ that's made by man, that's manufactured by man, and you never are free until Christ himself, the biblical Christ, comes and sets you free. When, in other words, we leave the cave. Now, thinking about the sun, the sun, we depend on it. It's our star. We need it. And there's this passage in scripture that I love the painting that it paints with words. In Revelation 21, verse 23, where it speaks about where all the believers are already in the New Jerusalem. We're already there. And check it out. Look what it says. Revelation 21, 23. And the city has no need of sun or moon to shine on it, for the glory of God gives it light, and its lamp is the Lamb. So here we have the city. It says, there's no need for stars. There's no need for the sun, for the moon, because Christ himself is the light of the city. The same way that the sun is the center of everything, Christ is the light. We depend on him wholeheartedly. Now, when I was preparing, I began to think, what would happen if the sun were just to disappear one day? If we didn't have the sun anymore? And what would happen if Christ truly didn't exist? If Christ was non-existent? What would happen to us as believers? And if the physical sun wasn't there, what would happen to us human beings? Here are some very interesting facts that I pulled up of what would happen in a matter of minutes to weeks to months if the sun just disappeared. Here we go. In 8 minutes, there would be no gravitational pull from the sun, and the planets would stop orbiting and would all travel in a single line in space. There would be no order to anything. So everything would just lose its order. They would just travel wherever. Now, that's only in 8 minutes. In 9 minutes, we would be plunged into complete darkness. Now, we wouldn't see it. It would take a while because of the way the light travels. But in 9 minutes, we would just be in complete darkness. And in those same 9 minutes, depending if it's night or day when the sun just decides to just disappear, we would no longer see the moon because, the sun reflects on the moon, and that's the reason why we even get to see it. We would still be able to see the stars because, the stars are their own source of light, but we wouldn't be able to see the moon. Now, in a matter of days, we would freeze, it would get to the point of freezing temperatures. And in a matter of weeks, the plants will no longer be able to, survive. And they, obviously plants and trees give off oxygen. So we would be very limited on oxygen. And in a matter of months, in a matter of a month, all humans would have to actually get on some sort of submarine or some sort and go down to the bottom of the ocean because we'd be close to the core, and the center of the earth, the core, it's hot, so we would have to go there to stay warm because anything above sea level would actually be frozen. We wouldn't be able to live here at all. So that's some of the things that would happen if the sun were to disappear. Now, what would happen if Christ, the biblical Christ, was non-existent? If he were to just to randomly disappear? Well, first of all, the Bible says that if Christ didn't resurrect, in vain would be our faith. So if Christ wasn't real, if Christ just disappeared, this faith that we have would just be, it would be worthless. There'd be no point to it. But because Christ resurrected, because he's alive, we have hope. There's substance to this faith. It has weight to it. We can trust it. It means something. There's meaning to our faith. It's not just an empty faith, but again, there's substance to it. Also, we would be completely lost. Hell would be a guaranteed destination for us. Heaven wouldn't even be an option for us at all. You would just be going all straight to hell. We would be lost without God for an eternity if Christ didn't exist. There'd be no chance of redemption, no chance of forgiveness, no chance of salvation. Just nothing would exist. There'd be no afterlife. There'd be no hope for us. And God wouldn't even be an option to us. It makes sense when Christ made the statement where he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one can come to the Father except through me. Now, him being the way means that we're lost. We need direction. Christ came, he offered us direction. He said, first of all, you want to come to the Father, you have to come through me. But then also, I go to prepare a place for you, so that where I am at, you get to be as well. He's going to prepare this place of eternal rest for us, and he's there, and he's the light of our city. He gives life. He gives light and life to everything. And he is the truth, meaning that humans were caught up in a lie, and he came to clear all lies and be objective truth. And all of us were walking in death, but Christ came to offer us life, and also he came to offer us a chance at salvation. And that's a wonderful privilege. But now, what was the Christ that I was introduced to as a kid? What did he look like? What was it like? Well, I'll get to that in a little bit, but let me tell you what began my separation from that Christ. What was the first thing that happened? Well, it all began with a prayer. And this is something that I prayed about when I was about 14. And it's something that I still pray to this day. I'm 35 years old, and I've been praying that since I was 14. And my prayer was the following. It's a very simple prayer. I said, Lord, help me to view you not through the lens of an apostolic, but help me to view you through the lens of a man who is in desperate need of needing to know who you are. That's it. That's all I prayed. That's all I asked for. I said, Lord, help me to view you through the lens of a man who's in desperate need of needing to know who you are. I don't want to view you through the lens of religion, because I've already seen that Christ, and it's left me broken and hurt. I need to know who you are. And ever since I prayed that, I felt like he has been pulling me away to the point where I've completely separated myself from that. And I have felt such a freedom because I've now come to know the biblical Christ. And also, he has answered that prayer and has made himself tangible through historical evidence. And, I love apologetics. I completely love it. And I talked about it in the previous episode where, we can't expect people to come and believe in the Christ without providing something tangible for them. We can't. There is ways of experiencing Christ in a tangible way, not just through the Bible, but through historical evidence. And to support that, let me read you guys a quote by H.G. Wells. And he was an English novelist, a journalist, sociologist, and a historian. Matter of fact, he wrote one of my favorite books, The Time Machine. Yes, it was made into a movie. And, I think every bookworm can agree that the movies are just never as good as the books. The books are always better, hands down. They're always better. So when I first read this quote by H.G. Wells, it completely blew me away, and I felt such a peace when I read this. And let me read it to you guys. He said, I am a historian. I am not a believer, but I must confess as a historian that this penniless preacher from Nazareth is irrevocably the very center of history. Jesus Christ is easily the most dominant figure in all history. He's saying, me as an objective historian, I have to speak the truth, objective truth. I don't believe in this Jesus, but you know what? He is the most dominant figure in history. There's no one else like him. In other words, he truly did live, he truly did die, and he truly did resurrect. He's the center of history, the most dominant figure. There's no one else like him. I don't believe in him, but he truly did exist and still exists to this day. That's historical evidence. You can't argue against historical objective evidence. And that brings such a peace to us. Now, has it ever happened to you that you've been sick and for some reason when you walk out into the sun, it just feels completely good? You just feel so relaxed. You just feel, our body needs that. And especially, I think the sun, they say that the sun has like vitamin D and we need that. It's, it just feels so good. And if you've experienced that, you know what I'm talking about. Well, let me tie it in to something. Before that, let me say this. Let me give an explanation about the Christ that was presented to me as a kid. It was a Christ that I feel like demanded perfection from me. A Christ that if I wanted to feel accepted or loved by him, I had to meet certain requirements. That if I wanted to receive forgiveness, I had to do something to achieve that. If I wanted to have salvation, I had to do it by works. If I wanted to have God use me in ministry, I had to do X, Y, and Z. I had to be a certain way, look a certain way. Without it, I couldn't even get near him. I couldn't come. In other words, the passage of come boldly before the throne of grace, that was almost just like, it wasn't even true, because if I wanted to approach it, I had to do certain things. Let me give you guys two examples of one that I got to experience as a leader, and also just something personal. Now, I've had the privilege of being in ministry for a couple of years now, and also have the privilege of just leading young people, being a youth leader, and it's just been amazing, just serving and leading these young people. They're just a great group of kids. One time, it was Easter Sunday, and we were about to take, part of the Last Supper. And, we were there at church, and they called up the women first. So the women go up, and they take part of it. Then they called the men, and the men went up, and they took part of it. And it was time for the young people to go up. So I was like, okay, cool. All the kids are going to come up. There was only like 4 of us that went up. And I was like so confused. And I'm like, what happened? Like, where's all these kids at? Like, why aren't they up here? So we took part of it, and that same day, and I was just talking to them. I was like, hey guys, what happened? Why didn't you guys go up? And they said, bro, we're not worthy. We just heard the preacher say that, that if you're in sin, you can't, that, you're just not worthy of taking part of that. So these kids feel like they didn't meet the requirements to take part of that. And they were baptized. There were kids who had given their life to Christ. But they just, they couldn't, because they had this burden over to themselves that they weren't worthy of that. And that hurt. And then, it was around that time where I began to kind of break away from this religious Christ that I had been introduced to. So it was just, it was heartbreaking to see and even now, the amount of people that are carrying this burden that the biblical Christ never intended for us to carry. Christ wants to offer us peace and rest in his presence. Yes, he does call us to deny ourselves and carry a cross, but for us to carry a burden of unworthiness or just shame, that's not what the biblical Christ has to offer us. Now, let me tell you guys another thing that happened, but this one actually happened to me. And to be honest, I don't know how it began. I don't know when's the first time I did it, or even better yet, why. I mean, I have an idea. But before I would read the Bible, I used to always go and wash my hands because, I'm reading a holy book, so I had to wash my hands for it. So I was about to start reading, and I'm walking to the bathroom, and all of a sudden, halfway, I feel God speak to me, and he said, Heido, why do you worry about purifying the outside, and you don't worry about cleaning what is on the inside? I stopped in my tracks, and I was just shocked, and I was numb, and I didn't know what to do, because that's all he said. He's like, why do you worry about cleaning the outside, but you don't worry about cleaning the inside? I turned around, and I went, and I got on my knees, and I began to cry and just weep, and I was like, God, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I have been focusing so much on the outside. That was my focus. I wanted to purify the outside, but Christ was like, let me inside. I want to purify what's inside of you. I want to work inside your heart. Yes, I'll take care of the outside stuff, but let me start. And you know what? The religious Christ and just the religious way is like, no, purify the outside and then it'll go into the inside. But Christ is like, no, I want to dwell inside and then work on you from the inside out. And, ever since, again, it was just moments like that just led me to realize just how much I was being burdened by this religious, man-made, manufactured Christ that was just demanding perfection from me, from a lot of us. When Christ never demands perfection from us, he never says, I expect you to do all these things, then I will love you. No, Christ loves us despite of our sin. While we were yet sinners, he loved us and still loves us even despite our humanity. Christ was tempted like us, never sinned because Christ is perfect. He was tempted like us, but never sinned. And he's like, I understand your weaknesses. I understand what it is to be human and struggle, but just, I'm here for you. I'm not going to, matter of fact, when he was leaving, he said, I'm not going to leave you alone. I'm sending you the Comforter. And he will lead you on to all truth, and the truth will set you free. We're being set free by Christ because he said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. So Christ wants to free us not just from the bondage of sin and the bondage of the world and the enemy, but also of religion, of this religious Christ that is being just pushed into people's lives and again is demanding perfection from us. But Christ is saying, stop worrying about cleaning the outside. Worry about the inside, and then we'll worry about the outside. Like, that's what matters more. I want to work on the inside. Now, there are a lot of people who have been wounded by this formulated Christ. A lot of people who are hurt. And some people have also gotten to the point where they are led to spiritual death, spiritual suicide, because they don't feel worthy because of the fabricated Christ, the formulated Christ, and what he demands of us. Sorry, let me read you guys Malachi chapter 4, verse 2. And it says, but for you who fear my name, the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in its wings. You shall go out like leaping calves from the stall. Another version says, when the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in his rays. Let me tell you guys a story. One time, we were in Mexico, and I had a bad fever. I had the chills. I had a cough, I had a sore throat, and everything. And I remember my dad was like, "Hey, I need you to do this. Lay a blanket on the floor, on the roof, because we had one of those two-story houses, and the roof is like just plain." And he said, "Lay a blanket, cover yourself in a thick blanket, throw yourself on there, and sleep. And trust me, you will feel better." Now, I don't know if that was really cruel of them or not, but it worked. I remember I laid there, and again, I just had a bad fever. Everything hurt. My throat, I had chills. Everything was just bad. So I ended up falling asleep. I knocked out maybe for like about an hour and a half to 2 hours. When I woke up, I was completely, I was healed. Nothing hurt. The fever was gone. The throat was gone. Throat pain was gone. The cough was gone. Everything, the chills. My bones didn't hurt. And it was from laying in the sun. And I was made whole just by being and taking in the rays of the sun. Malachi talks about that the Son of Righteousness shall rise with healing in his wings. Now, this passage was actually prophetic, and it came fulfilled with the woman with the issue of blood. She's walking, as we know, this woman who tried different remedies to try to be made whole, and nothing ever worked until one day she hears about Jesus, and she sees him walking, and she says, if only I can just go touch the hem of his garment. That's it. I need to go and just touch, and I know I'll be made whole. She goes and she touches the hem of his garment, and Jesus says, someone touched me. And the disciples are like, come on, Lord, there's so many people that are just, pressed up against you. And he's like, no. Healing has happened. Virtue has left me. In other words, someone realizes that the Son of Righteousness is here, and there's healing found in his wings, in its rays. It's here. Now, let's go back to the woman with the issue of blood. Sorry, my voice. Let's go back to this woman with the issue of blood. In the Bible, blood is known as a covenant. This woman had an issue of blood. This fabricated Christ has made us come into a covenant that has left us with an issue as a result of that covenant. We're walking around hurting. We're walking around in pain, suffering, trying to find some sort of remedy, service after service, revival after revival, preaching after preaching, worship songs after worship songs, and nothing tends to happen because we are being affected by this covenant that is manufactured by man. We're walking around with an issue of blood. There is an issue in this manufactured Christ. But then here comes Christ, the Son of Righteousness, with healing in his wings, with healing in his rays, and says, come here. If only you would just touch the hem of my garment, you will be made free. You will be set free, not just of your struggle with sin, but from religion, from this fabricated Christ, from this Christ that has hurt you. I invite you to a new covenant, to one where you will not be let down. You will not be ashamed. You will not be shamed by it. You will be actually restored. You'll be given purpose. You'll be given eternal life because of it. I want you to come and get rid of your issue with that old covenant and come and experience this new covenant that I'm offering to you. And like it says in there that, that we will just end up leaping like calves from the stall. That's what happens when you're free, when you're set free, when the chains break. You feel such a freedom. And it's funny how in the book, The Allegory of the Cave, this man, when he discovers the sun and he realizes everything, that this is true, the man is happy because he's finally seeing things for what they really are. And that's what freedom does. That's what Christ comes to offer. He said, once more, he says, I come, I'm the way, the truth, and the life. And the truth will set you free. You will be made free from the bondage of religion, from the bondage of this fabricated, formulated Christ that was made by man. Christ is offering us himself. He is offering us to make us free. That is the message today. Christ alone. Christ is sufficient. Christ is necessary. The biblical Christ. And once more, he is inviting us to a new covenant with him. Guys, this is today's episode. I hope it has been challenging. Hopefully it has got us thinking. Thank you so much for tuning in. I really do appreciate it. And guys, get ready for next week's episode where I will continue, not just from experience, but from a biblical perspective, how I've come to understand that the biblical Christ, there is healing and deliverance only found in him and who he is and how he differs from the religious formulated Christ by man. Guys, may we all stay simply thinking. Until next time. Thank you, guys.